Hello and welcome to the sewing studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make these little baskets using 10-inch squares. Now sometimes when you've bought your whole pack of layer cakes, you might only need 36 for your project, for your beautiful quilt, or you might only need 40. So sometimes you end up with squares left over from layer cakes. Now you can make these projects using these leftover squares, and you can see I've got a few different ones here. Alternatively, you can cut your own fabric, so you can buy fat quarters and you can cut a 10-inch square. And in fact, this one you can make any size. So if you've got a fat quarter, you could make it bigger than that. But what I'm going to do is show you what you can do with leftover 10-inch squares. So I've got 3 baskets here. So the first one here is made as a soup cosy. So if you want to keep your bowl of soup warm, then you can use this cosy. This is made using 2 squares and wadding in the middle. And this bowl, as you can see, fits perfectly in there. So perfect for your bowl of soup. Then this one here, you could use to put any bits and pieces in. You could fill it with sweets if you wanted to, or you can see I've got some sewing notions in here. And as I say, this one will work with any size square. And then I've got this little basket. Sorry, let me just go back. This one's made with 2 10-inch squares. Both of these made with 2 10-inch squares. This little basket, I got sidetracked because it's full of chocolate. That was a problem. This little basket is made using 4 10-inch squares. So I'm going to show you how to make each of these. So we're going to start off with this one. This is the easiest one. I'm going to save the best till last. We're going to start with this one. So what you need is 2 10-inch squares. So I've got 2 10-inch squares here, and I've got a contrast colour. So these are left over from different fabric ranges, but I think the 2 colours complement each other. So what you do is on the back side of each square, you iron some Vilene or interfacing. So you want a nice, strong, heavyweight interfacing. And you want the bobbly side, so you can feel there's 2 different, one side's smooth, one side's bobbly. You want the bobbly side down on the wrong side of your fabric. And you can see here, let me show you on the dark one, that I've cut it short of the square, just to make it easier for stitching. So I'm going to go to the iron now, and I'm going to press that onto the back. And then the next thing you would do is you would put your 2 squares right sides together, and you would sew all the way round the edge, all the way round, and you would leave a gap for turning it through. So here's one that I prepared earlier. So I've stitched these 2 together like this all the way round using a 1/4 inch seam. I snipped across the corners just to get rid of the bulk, turned it through, and then I top stitched near to the edge, and the top stitching also closed the gap from where I turned it through. So the next bit is for you to decide what you want as your outside fabric and what you want as your inside fabric. So if I want this as my outside, this is the side I draw on. So if you remember that, whatever side you want as your outside, that's the side you draw on. So with my iron off pen, I'm going to make the sides 2 inches. So if you wanted to make the sides taller, you could do that. but you would then end up with a smaller space in the middle. But I quite like this size, so I'm going to do 2 inches. So I'm just going to measure 2 inches in all the way round. And then I'm going over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this middle square. So this middle bit here, that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to just stitch on that. And what that does is that forms our base. So I've sewn on the inside line all the way around the centre, and that's going to be the size of our base there. Now the next thing you need to do, you can see you've got these 2 lines here and here. So you need to match those up. So pinch your corner and then match up your 2 lines. So there and there. And then we're going to sew down that line to the corner of where our stitching stops. Let me show you on this side. I think the pen mark's a bit better on this side. Hold on. There we are. So you can see I've pinched the corner and I'm going to sew down there. And I'm going to do that on all 4 corners. So you can see that that's created the basket, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch these corners in and press them, and by doing so I'm going to get rid of my red lines that I used as my template for sewing. So you could just leave the corners like that if you wanted to. You could press them in like I've done here, or you could even press them in and put little buttons on them if that's what you wanted to do. So I'm just going over to the iron now to give it a good press. So I'm pressing the sides in. So you can see I've pressed that at the iron, and you can see I've pushed the corners in, so that's our little basket. So you can fill it with sewing notions or little gifts or sweets or whatever you want. So that's how you make the little basket using 2 10-inch squares. So next up is the little bowl cozy. So you need 2 10-inch squares and you need 2 scraps of wadding onto the back of your 10-inch square. So you can see this one, I've already done some quilting. So I've just gone across and attached it like that. And I've done the same on this one, but I've also gone to the next stage with this one. So with each of your squares, you need to fold it in half and measure down 2 1/4 inches. Let me do it on this one. So I've already done those 2. So fold it in half and measure down 2 1/4 inches down. I'll tell you what, I'm going to get a smaller ruler. Make life easier. Right. So measure down 2 1/4 and mark it, and then measure across 1 1/2 and mark it, and then draw a line, and you're going to sew on that line there through all of your layers, and you're going to do the same at the other end. So we just measure that again. So 2 1/4 down. I'm having difficulty with my measurements today. 1.5 across and draw a line. And then you're going to sew along those lines. And then when you've sewn across the lines, so you can see that I've done one here where I've done all 4, you're going to snip away the bulk. So you're going to end up with 2 pieces of fabric with your wadding on, where you've done your darts and you've snipped away the bulk. So you've got a scant quarter here, so you can see my line, and then I've snipped away the bulk. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to turn these to face one another, and you're going to put some pins in. So I pinned mine at the seams and the corners. And you are going to need to leave a gap. So I would pin at your seams and your corners still, but decide where you're going to leave your gap. And I would suggest that you leave a gap here, so you're not on a seam and you're not on a corner. So I'm just going to put a little pencil mark there and there to remind me not to stitch there. So I'm going to the machine and I'm going to sew all the way around the edge and leave a gap for turning. So now I'm just going to very carefully snip off the corners to get rid of some of the bulk of the wadding, but being careful not to sew through my stitching. And then I'm going to turn it through. So I've left a gap here for turning. So I'm going to turn the whole thing through. And then I've got these handy little things that I can just carefully poke out of the corners using these, being careful not to poke through all the corners. And these are quite good if you want to grab the inside to pull it through when you've got to turn things inside out. So these are really useful little things. So here, for example, I can't find the corner, so I can open these and put them in and pinch, and it pulls it out. So there we have it all turned through, and our next job is to give it a good press. So we'd give that a really good press, and then we would just top stitch around this edge here to close the gap. And if you have a look at this one, you can see how this has been top stitched all the way round, and actually it's reversible, so you can have it that way round if you want, or you can have it that way round. So a nice easy little bowl cosy using 2 10-inch squares. So my favourite, probably because it's got chocolate in, is this gorgeous little basket. It doesn't have to be for Easter, it can be for anything, but because of the colours I thought about Easter treats in it. So we need 4 10-inch squares for this. So the thing to do is to decide on your colours. So whatever colour you want your handle. So I'm going to go with this grey for the handle. So I'll talk about that in a minute. We'll just put that to one side. And I'm going to have this cuff here. This is also going to be grey. So I'm going to put that to one side. And then I've got the yellow and the pink. And I'm going to have the pink on the outside of the basket and the yellow dots on the inside. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the handle and we're going to make the cuffs. The other thing you need is a 9.5-inch square of wadding. So we'll just put those to the one side because that's for the body of the basket. But what we're going to do now is we're going to make this lovely strong handle, and we're going to make 2 cuffs. So with the handle, we'll go to the iron now, and I'll show you how we're going to press it in and again to make the handle. So I'm going to fold it in half and give it a press. And then open it out and fold it to the centre line and press. Fold this again to the centre line, press. And then what I'm going to do is fold it in half again, press, and then I'm going to fold that to the centre. It's quite bulky, but it makes it really strong. That to the centre. And then fold that in half again. So that is going to be our handle. So now I've got my press lines, just to recap for you. So we fold it in half, then we fold it again to the centre, and then we fold it again. And now I'm going to stitch either side of this line to make a nice strong handle, so you can see that stitching here. So there's our handle made. Now we're going to make this cuff. So we're going to cut this in half, so we've got 2 5 by 10 inch pieces of fabric. And then we're going to fold each of these in half and give them a good press. And that is what forms our cuffs. Our 2 cuffs. Next we're going to need our piece of wadding, and we're going to fold this in half, and we are going to cut 1.5 inches off of each corner. Just going to snip that out. And next I'm going to fuse the piece of fabric onto the wadding. So the wadding is slightly smaller than the square, so I'm just going to try and centre it up a little bit. So I'm just going to fuse it with a little bit of 505 spray. I'm only using the tiniest amount, and we have got the window open. So that's ready to go. So I've put my fabric on top of the wadding, and that is going vertically with the gap that I've cut from the wadding at the top and the bottom. I've laid the 2 cuffs on and stitched those in place, and the fold is going into the centre, and then I've laid the basket handle, which is this piece, over. I've measured the centre point and I've machined that, so I've got all this as a complete unit. The next thing I'm going to do is take my lining fabric. I'm going to put that right sides together. I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to sew down the 2 sides where I've already stitched the handle and the cuff, and at the moment I'm leaving open the ends where the cutaways are. So I'm just going to the machine to do that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lining and I'm going to pull that across like that, and I'm going to line up the two cuffs, because this is the side of the baskets now. This is this piece here. So I'm going to pop a pin in there. The same at the other side. Line up your cuffs. And I'm going to sew straight the way down and straight the way down, but I am going to leave a gap here in my lining to turn it through. So I'm going to do that next. And then the next thing I'm going to do, where I've got this piece cut out here with my wadding, I'm just going to pull that open and I'm going to stitch across there like that, across the diagonal, and that's what gives us this nice seam here. And I'm going to do that both sides and in the lining. And now with that done, we're going to turn it all the way through. And you can top stitch round if you want to. You're going to have to slip stitch the little gap closed that's in the lining and give it a really good press. And there's your little basket ready to fill with treats, like this basket here. Just going to pull that down a little bit. I think once I've got the lining stitched, it will sit a little bit better than that. So that's how you make another little basket. So there you can see we've made lots of projects using 10-inch squares. So if you haven't got any 10-inch squares, we've got some lovely packs of layer cakes here, so you could buy a whole pack and think how many of these projects you could make with those. We're also so close to our 100,000 subscribers. So I would love it if you would subscribe, so you'll help us to just tip over that 100,000. I do hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. There's some fun things to make. As always, make them your own, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you next time here in the sewing studio.